Once you get beyond the obvious differences in the user interface, one of the first things you're likely to discover about Revit is that all of the tools on the ribbon are named for actual things. Instead of drawing lines in the shape of walls, you draw actual walls. Instead of placing blocks that are configured to look like doors, we place actual doors, and so on. In this movie, we will introduce you to one of Revit's most fundamental concepts. Instead of drafting, we will be modeling. So I'm in a blank empty file here. This is just based off the default architectural template, and we're going to work completely from scratch. Now, since most buildings have walls, that seems like a pretty good place to start to me. So I'm going to come over here to the Architecture tab and click on the Wall button. Now, I'm going to accept most of the defaults here. It's a generic 8-inch wall. That's fine. And I'm going to focus on the shapes over here. Now, you could draw your walls line by line if you want, but I'm going to undo that. I'm doing Control-Z here to undo that. What I'm going to do instead here is just choose one of these built-in shapes, like a rectangle. And this allows me to just draw 2 points instead and get a really simple rectangular shaped building. Now, like we discussed in the previous movie, to make the size of this building precise, the next step I would do would be to modify those temporary dimensions. So perhaps I want this building to be 50 feet long and maybe 32 feet wide. So by just simply editing those two dimensions, I can fine-tune the size of that building. I'm going to roll my wheel to zoom in and switch back to a line object here. And maybe I want to draw a few walls on the inside. Notice that all you have to do is snap to the existing objects, and they will automatically join and clean up with the neighboring walls. So that's pretty handy. So the next most obvious thing you might want to do is to put some doors and windows in here. So I'm going to go to the Architecture tab, and we've got a tool for each of those. Here's my door tool. And one of the things we see about the door tool is that initially it won't let me place it anywhere. I get that sort of circle with the line through it symbol saying, sorry, you can't place this. The reason for that is if you look down at the status line at the very bottom of the screen, it says click on a wall to place the door. So before a door will appear, you have to actually highlight an existing wall. Now, if you think about it, it makes perfect sense. By definition, a door is a hole in a wall. So not only do we have these objects that look and behave like the objects they meant to represent, but they also have some built-in intelligence to them. So before I can place a door, I've got to actually click a wall. And so if I want, I can place a few doors here. Now notice that the message also says we can tap the space bar to change the direction of that door. So that's pretty handy as you're drawing if you don't like which way it's swinging. Now I'm going to use my modify tool here to cancel out of there. And you would place windows in much the same way. Notice that they also have to be placed on walls. You can't place a window freestanding out here in space. Now, I'm not going to do an entire floor plan here. I just want to give you some basic idea of how these various objects work. At some point, you're probably going to want to start looking at this model from another view. Now, our default template started with just some basic floor plans and some basic elevations. So if I open up an elevation, you can see here in this south view that that's showing me the 3 windows that I just placed. If I look at the north view, it's showing me that door that I placed. Now, maybe I want to put a roof on this building. If I open up what Revit calls a default 3D view, we already know that our building needs a roof. If I click this icon right here, it looks kind of like a little birdhouse. It's going to be really obvious that our building doesn't have a roof. Now, when you're working in 3D in Revit, like this view right here, you can hold down the Shift key and drag the wheel on your mouse, and you can spin it around to get a better look. So it's pretty obvious that we need a roof here. So I'm going to go to the top level floor plan here, level 2, and I'm going to build my roof in this level. Now, the roof we build a little differently than the other objects. The other objects were simpler objects, but when I click the roof command here, you're going to see something immediately changes on screen. Everything kind of grays out. We're in a special mode here called sketch mode. This has a lot of really interesting tools, like this one right here, which says pick walls. What this allows me to do is to actually highlight my existing walls and create the edges of my roof based on those walls, so it will match the same shape of the building. Now, before I start clicking those points, I can actually configure some of the settings here, like perhaps I want to have an overhang on those edges. So if I come over here and I highlight, notice that I get this purple line We call that a sketch line. And it's highlighted 1 foot away because of this 1 foot overhang that I indicated. Now watch what happens when I click the next wall. You see how the corners automatically join up, and they automatically join up. Now the trick here is you need to create a single continuous closed shape. If you were missing one of these lines, that wouldn't be a valid roof. I'm going to Control Z to undo that. But as long as I have a closed shape like this, I can now come over here to this big green checkbox and I can say, let's finish that edit mode. And when I do, Revit will ask me a question here. It's saying, hey, you see all these walls over here? They all go through the roof. And they're saying, do you want to attach those to maybe make this model make a little more sense? And I'm going to say yes here. And if we go back to our 3D view, we end up with something that looks like this. What's important about the way we built the roof was there's two intelligent relationships that we've just established there. The first was we used the pick walls option to build the roof in the first place. What this means is if you select one of these walls and modify its location, not only does it move that wall, not only does it keep the other walls joined to it, but as you can see, it adjusted the size of the roof as well. The other one was the attach option, which if I came over here and I selected this roof and gave it a height offset right here, let's say 5 feet, that's going to pull that roof up when I apply it. And notice that the walls continue to stay attached to the underside of the roof. So when you're building your model in Revit, it's not just independent drafted exercises. There's a whole lot of relationships that are being associated to these objects as you build them, and you're building a more unified, intelligent model.